Some distance is meant to protect, the kind maintained not from indifference, but from fear of causing harm, from believing that the safest thing you can do for someone is stay away. For King Theon, who'd spent 3 centuries learning that his touch could destroy what he cared about, maintaining absolute distance from his new bride felt like the only kindness he could offer. Their marriage was political necessity, arranged to unite 2 kingdoms through treaty. Princess Celestia had arrived at his palace with grace and dignity, had spoken her vows with perfect composure, had accepted her role as his queen with practiced diplomacy, and Theon had decided immediately that the best thing he could do for this woman forced into marriage with the Beast King was never touch her, never risk the curse that made his touch dangerous, never subject her to the beast he became. He could give her title, resources, respect, and careful distance. What he couldn't give her was physical connection. And he'd convinced himself that was merciful rather than cruel. Then came the night 3 months into their marriage when he heard her crying, not the controlled tears of political disappointment or strategic sadness, raw, broken sobbing that came from someone who'd reached their limit and couldn't hold it together anymore. He found her in the palace gardens at midnight, collapsed on a stone bench, crying like her heart was shattering, and every instinct he'd spent 3 centuries controlling screamed at him to comfort her, to offer physical reassurance, to hold her and promise it would be okay. But he couldn't, because touching her meant risking everything, so he stood in the shadows, listening to her break, and felt his own heart crack in response. Celestia had been raised to be the perfect princess.
She would do the same. It wasn't personal. It was just how royal families functioned. She'd been educated comprehensively. Languages, diplomacy, arts, economics, everything required to be an asset to whatever kingdom she married into. She was intelligent and accomplished, the kind of person who excelled at whatever she attempted. She was also desperately lonely in ways she'd learned to hide perfectly. Being raised as political currency meant relationships were always strategic. Friendships were evaluated for benefit. Romantic interests were vetted for appropriateness. Nothing was genuine because everything served larger purpose. By 24, she'd accepted this was her life. Would marry strategically, would fulfill her duty, would be the perfect queen her family needed her to be. When her father announced she'd be marrying King Theon to secure a peace treaty with his kingdom, Celestia had accepted with practiced grace, asked the relevant questions about expectations and responsibilities,
studied everything available about Theon and his realm, prepared herself mentally for becoming wife to the immortal Beast King. The information she gathered suggested he was powerful, respected, but profoundly isolated. 3 centuries of ruling alone, no close relationships mentioned in any historical records, rumors of a curse that made him dangerous. The Beast King who everyone feared, but nobody truly knew. Celestia had convinced herself this would be manageable, a political marriage to a distant king. They'd exist in parallel, fulfill their duties, maintain professional partnership without emotional complication. She wouldn't expect warmth or connection. He likely wouldn't either. It would be civilized and empty, exactly what she'd been trained for. The wedding had been elaborate, 2 kingdoms celebrating the alliance with ceremony that lasted hours. Celestia had worn traditional bridal attire from both realms, symbolizing the unity. She'd spoken her vows clearly. Looking directly at Theon as protocol demanded, he'd responded with equal formality, his voice steady but his expression carefully neutral. When the ceremony required them to join hands for the binding ritual, she'd noticed his hesitation. Just a moment, barely perceptible, but present. He touched her hand with obvious reluctance, completed the ritual as quickly as protocol allowed, then pulled away immediately. The contact lasted maybe 10 seconds. To wrap the reception, Theon maintained careful physical distance, never touching her unless absolutely required by ceremony. When they danced the traditional first dance, he'd held her at arm's length, his hands positioned to minimize contact.
When they were presented to the court as married couple, he'd offered his arm with visible tension, like the touch caused him pain. Celestia had noticed but didn't comment. Maybe he found her repulsive. Maybe immortal kings just didn't do physical affection. Maybe this was how all political marriages functioned. She could adapt. That night, when they were finally alone in the royal quarters they now shared, Theon had been direct. "We have separate bedrooms. You'll have complete privacy and autonomy. I won't intrude on your space or make demands you're uncomfortable with. This marriage is political necessity. We'll fulfill our public duties, but privately you're free to live as you choose." Celestia had felt relief and inexplicable disappointment. Relief because she wasn't expected to perform intimacy. Disappointment because the words felt like rejection, even though that was illogical. "Thank you for clarifying expectations." She'd maintained diplomatic composure. "I appreciate the autonomy. Is there anything else I should know about how you'd like this arrangement to function?" "Just that I'll be respectful of your boundaries." His voice had been carefully neutral. "You're queen now. That comes with resources and authority. Use them as you see fit. I'll support your initiatives and ensure you're treated with appropriate dignity. Beyond that, I'll leave you to establish your own routine." Then he'd retreated to his bedroom, closing the door with quiet finality, leaving Celestia alone in luxurious quarters that suddenly felt like a beautiful cage. The first months of their marriage established the pattern. Publicly, they were united rulers, attended council meetings together, made joint policy decisions, presented as cohesive leadership. Theon was respectful, consulted her perspective, supported her initiatives. He was the perfect political husband, in every way except one. He never touched her. Not casually, not affectionately, not at all beyond what public ceremony absolutely required. And even then, he made contact as brief as possible. During formal events where protocol demanded he offer her arm, she'd feel him tense. During diplomatic receptions where dancing was expected, he'd maintain maximum distance. During policy discussions in private study where he might naturally touch her shoulder or hand to emphasize a point, he'd stay carefully away. Celestia tried not to take it personally, tried to convince herself this was just how he was, not specific rejection of her. But it was impossible not to notice the pattern. Other nobles and advisors had normal physical interaction, casual touches, friendly pats on shoulders, natural proximity during conversation. Theon maintained space from everyone, but especially from her. She started noticing other things: how he'd leave rooms if she entered, how he'd schedule his day to minimize time they were together, how he'd speak to her through messengers rather than face-to-face when possible. It went beyond physical distance to active avoidance. 3 months into their marriage, Celestia was managing her responsibilities competently, had established herself as capable queen, had earned respect from court and citizens, had everything except actual connection with her husband. She existed in parallel to Theon, both ruling the same kingdom, living in the same quarters, bound by the same vows, completely separate. The loneliness was crushing, not because she'd expected love from political marriage, but because the active avoidance felt like statement about her worth, like she was so repellent that even basic human contact was intolerable. She tried to be understanding, tried to respect his boundaries, tried to focus on her work and accept this was how things were. But some nights, the isolation became too much to bear. The breaking point came on a night when she'd received news from home. Her father was ill, not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough to be concerning. Her siblings had written with updates and reassurance, but Celestia felt the distance acutely. She couldn't visit because leaving during sensitive treaty negotiations would be politically problematic. Couldn't even express her worry properly because showing weakness wasn't appropriate for a queen. She'd managed through the day with practiced composure, handled her duties, attended meetings, maintained perfect diplomatic mask. But by midnight, alone in her quarters, the facade cracked. She'd gone to the palace garden seeking privacy, found a secluded bench far from the palace windows, and let herself fall apart. The crying started with quiet tears, escalated to sobbing she couldn't control. All the loneliness and isolation and fear for her father and resentment about being sent away and frustration with her emotionally distant husband poured out. She cried for her father's illness, for the childhood she'd lost to political training, for the marriage that was supposed to be duty but still hurt, for the husband who couldn't stand to touch her, for being alone in a palace full of people who respected her position but didn't know her as a person. She didn't hear Theon approach.
Didn't realize he was there until he spoke. Celestia. His voice was rough with emotion. What's wrong? She jerked upright, wiping tears hastily. Nothing, just tired. Please return to your quarters. Don't lie to me. He'd stepped closer, but still maintaining distance. You're not just tired, you're breaking. What happened? She'd felt anger spike through the grief. Why do you care? You've spent 3 months avoiding me, never speaking to me unless necessary, never touching me like I'm contaminated. Now you want to know what's wrong? Because hearing you cry is worse than any physical pain I've experienced in 3 centuries. His voice cracked. Because I've watched you be lonely and isolated, and I've done nothing to help, because I thought distance was kindness, because I'm realizing I've been cruel in ways I didn't intend. So please, tell me what's wrong so I can at least try to help. My father is ill. She'd said it flatly. I received word today. He's not dying, but he's not well. I can't visit because leaving would damage treaty negotiations. I can't even properly worry because queens don't show weakness. And I'm in a marriage where my husband won't even touch me, where I'm so apparently repulsive that basic human contact is impossible. So yes, I'm breaking because I've reached my limit of being alone while surrounded by people. Theon had looked stricken. You think I won't touch you because I find you repulsive? No. Gods, no. That's not why. Then why? She'd stood, anger giving her courage. Why do you flinch when ceremony requires you to hold my hand? Why do you arrange your schedule to avoid me? Why do you treat me like I'm poisonous? What did I do to deserve this? You didn't do anything. His hands had clenched at his sides. This isn't about you. It's about me. About a curse I carry that makes my touch dangerous. About protecting you from something you don't deserve to suffer. About being so terrified of hurting you that I hurt you in different ways instead. The admission hung between them. Celestia stared at him, trying to process. What curse? What do you mean your touch is dangerous? When I was young, barely into my 20s, I angered the wrong people. He'd looked exhausted suddenly. Made enemies who had power and patience. They cursed me, made my touch capable of causing pain to anyone I care about. The more I care, the more dangerous my touch becomes. It's why I've stayed alone for 3 centuries, why I've avoided connection, why I keep distance from everyone, but especially from you. So the more you care, the more your touch hurts. She'd been trying to understand. Yes, for casual acquaintances, nothing happens. But for people I have genuine emotional attachment to, my touch causes them pain proportional to my feelings. It's elegant cruelty, makes intimacy literally painful, ensures I stay isolated. Have you ever tested this with anyone you cared about? Once, long ago, he'd looked away. Someone I loved. My touch caused them agony. They left and I never risked it again. So for 300 years I've maintained distance. It was easier when I didn't care about anyone. But you, he'd met her eyes. From the moment we married, you've been kind and intelligent and genuine. I started caring, despite my best efforts, which means touching you would hurt you. So I stay away, to protect you. Celestia had felt her anger transform into something more complicated. You've been avoiding me to protect me? Not because you find me repellent, but because you're terrified of hurting me? Yes, his voice was barely audible. I know it looks like rejection. Feels like it too, probably. But Celestia,
I'd rather have you hate me for distance than scream in pain from my touch. At least this way you're safe. Did it ever occur to you to explain this? To tell me why, instead of letting me think I was so disgusting my own husband couldn't stand near me? I thought explaining would make it worse, would make you feel trapped with someone cursed. Better to maintain professional distance and let you build your own life than burden you with my damage. You idiot. She'd said it without heat. I'm your wife. I'm supposed to be your partner. Making unilateral decisions about what I can handle treats me like a child, not an equal. You should have told me, should have let me understand, instead of leaving me to draw my own painful conclusions. You're right. He'd looked miserable. I was trying to protect you and ended up hurting you anyway. I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this. Don't know how to have a partner when I've been alone for so long. Don't know how to balance protecting you from the curse with not making you feel rejected. They'd stood in the garden. 3 months of misunderstanding laid bare between them. Then Celestia had made a decision. Tell me exactly how the curse works. Every detail. Theon had explained. The curse activated through skin-to-skin contact, caused pain proportional to his emotional attachment. For someone he barely cared about, minimal effect. For someone he loved, it would be excruciating. The pain was immediate and intense, but didn't cause lasting damage. It was purely sensory, designed to make intimacy impossible. Has anyone tried to break it? Other than the person who tried 3 centuries ago? She'd been thinking practically. No, I accepted it as permanent. Learned to live with it. You accepted isolation for 300 years without fighting back? She'd felt anger on his behalf. Theon, that's not living. That's existing. We're finding a way to break this, or at least manage it. You can't just give up. I didn't give up. I adjusted. There's a difference. No, there isn't. She'd stepped closer, watching him tense. You surrendered, decided the curse won. I'm not accepting that. We're going to figure this out together because I refuse to spend my life married to someone I can't even touch. Celestia, the risk is mine to take. She'd cut him off. You've spent 3 centuries making decisions about this curse alone. Now you have a partner. We face this together, starting with research into breaking or managing it. You said the pain is proportional to your feelings. Have you ever tested whether gradual exposure might build tolerance? No, I wasn't willing to risk hurting anyone repeatedly. Well, I'm willing to risk it. She'd extended her hand. Touch me. Now. I can't. You can. She'd kept her hand steady. I'm asking you to. I want to understand what we're dealing with. Please, Theon, trust me enough to try. He'd looked at her extended hand like it was both salvation and damnation. Then slowly, he'd reached out. Their fingers had touched. The pain hit Celestia immediately. Sharp, burning sensation where their skin connected. Not unbearable, but definitely present. Like touching something too hot, but not quite hot enough to burn. She'd held steady, not pulling away, letting the sensation register fully.
That's what it feels like? Yes. His voice was strained. For you, that's moderate discomfort. For someone I loved deeply, it would be much worse. It's tolerable. She'd squeezed his fingers gently. Uncomfortable, but not agonizing. How long have we been touching? Maybe 10 seconds? Do you want to stop? Not yet. She'd focused on the sensation. It's intense, but I can manage it. Let's see if it changes over time or stays consistent. They'd stood connected for a full minute. The pain remained constant, didn't escalate or diminish. When Celestia finally pulled away, her hand felt normal immediately. No lasting damage, no residual pain. See? She'd shown him her unmarked hand. Tolerable. Not pleasant, but manageable. That was with minimal emotional attachment. He'd looked devastated. After 3 months of marriage where I've been trying not to care about you, if I actually let myself feel everything I'm trying to suppress, it would be worse.
Then we work on breaking the curse while you keep suppressing. And in the meantime, we establish what level of contact is sustainable. Because Theon, I'd rather have uncomfortable touch than no touch at all. At least the first option treats me like a partner. You'd really accept painful contact just to maintain connection? She'd made his eyes directly. I'd accept a lot of things to have an actual marriage instead of this cold coexistence. But I'm not accepting the pain long term. We're finding a way to break this curse because you deserve freedom and I deserve a husband who can hold my hand without hurting me. In the meantime, we work with what we have, starting with honesty. No more avoiding me. No more hiding your reasoning. We face this together. Agreed? Theon had looked at this woman who'd been crying alone in the gardens an hour ago and was now demanding they face a 3-century curse together. Agreed. But I'm setting boundaries.
We don't exceed my tolerance for causing you pain. We research cautiously. And if you ever want to stop trying, I'll accept that without argument. Fair. She'd felt lighter than she had in months. Now take me inside and explain everything about this curse. Every detail, every attempted solution, everything you know. We're treating this like the strategic problem it is. They'd gone to his study, talked until dawn. Celestia took detailed notes, asked hundreds of questions, approached the curse like the complex challenge it was. She'd been educated in magical theory as part of her comprehensive training, could understand the mechanics Theon described. The next days, she'd consulted every magical expert in the kingdom, brought in specialists from neighboring realms, assembled a team to study the curse from every angle. Theon had watched her work with growing admiration and terror. Admiration because she was brilliant and relentless.
Terror because she was investing enormous effort into something that might be impossible. 2 weeks into her research, Celestia had called him to her study. I have a theory. The curse is tied to your emotional state. It manifests as pain proportional to your feelings. But pain is just sensory information. What if we could train your mind to process the emotion differently? To separate caring about someone from the physical manifestation? That's not how curses work. He'd been skeptical. You can't just think your way out of dark magic. No, but you can work with it. She'd shown him diagrams, mental discipline techniques used by mages to control their magic. If you could learn to regulate your emotional state while maintaining connection, theoretically you could reduce the curse's effect. It would require intense training and practice, but it's possible. You're suggesting I learn to suppress my emotions more effectively? Not suppress, regulate, she'd corrected.
Acknowledge the feelings, but create separation between emotion and physical manifestation. Like mages learn to cast spells without being consumed by the magic. You'd feel everything, but the curse wouldn't activate as strongly. This could take years to learn, if it even works. Then we spend years learning. She'd said it like it was obvious. Theon, I'm your wife. I'm committed to this marriage, to you. I can wait while you learn to manage a curse that's trapped you for 3 centuries. Take the time you need. I'll be here. The training had been grueling. Celestia worked with magical experts to develop techniques specific to Theon's curse, mental exercises to create separation between emotion and physical response, meditation practices to maintain control, gradual exposure therapy, where he'd practice touching her for increasing durations while managing the curse's activation. The first months showed minimal progress. The pain remained consistent. Celestia enduring discomfort during practice sessions with determined grace. But slowly, incrementally, Theon learned to regulate the curse's manifestation. 6 months in, he could hold her hand for several minutes with only mild discomfort to her. A year in, he could embrace her briefly without causing more than momentary sting. 18 months in, they managed their first kiss. It was quick, painful enough that Celestia's eyes watered, but possible. Their relationship deepened throughout the training. No longer maintaining distance, they spent hours together daily, talking, laughing, learning each other. The physical connection was limited, but the emotional intimacy grew exponentially. Celestia discovered Theon was funny and thoughtful and desperately lonely, wanted connection but was terrified of hurting people, had spent 3 centuries convinced he was unlovable because of the curse. Theon discovered Celestia was brilliant and determined and surprisingly compassionate. She never treated the curse training as burden or him as damaged, just approached it as problem to solve together, made him believe maybe he wasn't permanently broken. 2 years into their marriage, Theon could touch Celestia with minimal pain. Not completely comfortable, but tolerable enough for genuine affection. They could hold hands during walks, embrace without her flinching, kiss gently, sleep in the same bed with arms around each other. It wasn't perfect. The curse was still present, still requiring active management, but it was connection, real, physical, intimate connection. The first time they'd woken up tangled together, Celestia had smiled. This is what I wanted. Physical proof we're actually partners. She traced his face gently, worth every minute of painful practice. I'm sorry it took so long. He'd kissed her forehead. Sorry you had to endure pain for something I should have handled centuries ago. Stop apologizing. She'd silenced him.
You survived something terrible and did your best. I'm just grateful you let me help. Let me be part of the solution instead of another person you kept at distance. 3 years into their marriage, Celestia discovered she was pregnant. Unexpected given the curse's complications, but apparently possible. They'd have a child. Theon's reaction was complex, joy and terror. Joy at having a family, terror that the curse might affect his child. What if I can't hold them? His voice had broken. What if my touch hurts our baby? We'll manage it. Celestia had taken his hand firmly. We've managed everything else. We'll handle this too. If necessary, you practice the same regulation techniques. Our child will know you love them, regardless of the curse. Their son was born healthy, and miraculously, Theon's curse didn't affect him. Whether because parent-child bonds were different, or because the baby hadn't developed the emotional awareness to trigger the curse, his touch caused no pain. Theon had held their son for hours, crying with relief and joy. This was possible, holding someone he loved without hurting them. 5 years into their marriage, the curse was significantly manageable. Theon had mastered the mental regulation to the point where touching Celestia caused only the mildest sensation. Not quite comfortable, but close. They had normal physical intimacy, could be affectionate without her suffering. It wasn't broken, but it was controlled. 10 years into their marriage, during a quiet evening in quarters they fully shared, Celestia asked him something. That night in the garden when you heard me crying, what made you approach instead of maintaining distance like you'd been doing? Because hearing you break was worse than any pain I could cause. He'd held her close, the curse barely noticeable anymore. Because I realized protecting you from my touch, but not protecting you from loneliness, was backwards. Because you needed me, and I'd been so focused on the curse that I forgot about the person suffering from my distance. I'm glad you came. She'd kissed him. Glad you finally told me the truth. Glad we fought this together instead of you carrying it alone. Me too. He tightened his arms around her. Best decision I made, letting you in instead of keeping you away. If this story reminded you that sometimes distance meant to protect actually harms, and that fighting curses together is better than suffering alone, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Drop a comment with the word moon if you believe vulnerability is stronger than isolation. Share this video with someone who needs to know that the people who love you want to help carry your burdens, even when those burdens feel impossible. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop protecting people from yourself and let them choose to stay anyway. Thanks for watching, and remember, curses lose power when faced together, and real love means sharing both the pain and the healing.